My name is Lauren Miller, and if I am honest, the first time I realized my family had decided my place in this world, I was 7. But the moment I understood how deep that truth ran was many years later, when I stood outside a Denver restaurant that I owned, but they believed I was not worthy to walk into. Still, to understand that day, I have to take you back to the house where it all began. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom home on the edge of Columbus, Ohio. The house had beige siding that faded every summer, a narrow porch with one loose board that squeaked under your foot, and a single maple tree in the front yard that dropped leaves like it was trying to bury us every fall. My parents always said it was a temporary home, a stepping stone until my father's job took off. But for me, it was the place where I learned exactly who mattered and who did not. Inside that house, my brother Daniel was the sun. He was the center of every plan, every conversation, every hope. When he wanted something, the world shifted to give it to him. When I wanted something, I learned to phrase it carefully, softly, like asking for a gift was almost rude. He had the bigger bedroom. He had the new laptop when he turned 14. He got the expensive soccer camps every summer and the private tutors during the school year. Meanwhile, my victories were quiet things like finishing a school project alone or getting an A on an exam with no help. I would bring my report card to the table, and my parents would smile without lifting their eyes from Daniel's schedule. "You're strong," they would say. "You don't need as much." I used to wonder what being strong meant. Was it a compliment or a way for them to excuse forgetting that I was also their child? I never asked. Children rarely do. We just accept the world we're placed in. When I graduated from high school, there was no talk of college. My father told me we simply did not have the savings for it. I remember nodding, swallowing the lump in my throat, pretending I understood. 2 years later, I watched my mother slide an envelope with almost $20,000 across our old wooden dining table for Daniel's first business idea. He had not even finished community college yet. My father clapped his shoulder and said Daniel was the future of this family. I washed dishes that night. Steam rose from the sink, and I let it hide the tears I would never let them see. So I left. I packed what I had into a worn-out duffel bag and moved to Chicago, Illinois. My first place was a basement studio with one small window facing an alley lined with dumpsters. Rent was high for someone earning minimum wage, and every month felt like I was fighting gravity. I worked days at a cafe, pouring coffee and plastering a smile on my face, then nights cleaning offices in the Loop. When tips were good, I bought a slice of pizza after work. When tips were bad, I toasted whatever bread I had left and added salt so it tasted like something. Chicago was loud, fast, and cold, but it was mine. There was no brother there, no parents, no shadow of their favorite child watching me. Still, at night, when I had a moment to myself, I would open the social media app one hated and look at pictures of their lives. Daniel's new car. Daniel's weekend trips. Daniel's birthday dinners. And in all of it, my parents smiled proudly at him. I was not in a single photo. After a while, it stopped hurting. It became something else. Proof. Proof that I had been invisible long before I walked out that door. Proof that even if I had stayed, nothing would have changed. But Chicago taught me something my family never did: how the world actually worked. Working at that cafe, I watched people. I learned how restaurants breathed, how managers handled trouble, and how owners made decisions. Late at night, while cleaning offices, I saw what successful businesses looked like behind the scenes. I studied invoices in recycling bins, overheard meetings I was never meant to hear, and took notes in a tiny notebook I kept hidden in my apron. Staff costs, vendor pricing, lease terms, profit margins. Things no one had ever taught me. Somewhere between sweeping floors and boxing leftover pastries, a quiet thought grew inside me. If I were going to be invisible, I might as well build something no one could take from me. That thought became a promise. A stubborn one. A loud one. The kind you whisper to yourself late at night because speaking it aloud feels dangerous. One day, I told myself I would own a place so beautiful that no one who ignored me could walk into it without feeling the weight of what they had done. A place where the girl they overlooked had built something impossible to overlook. I had no idea that the very restaurant I built from nothing the one I poured my savings and strength into, would become the same place my brother chose for his wedding. I had no idea that my family, who never once asked if I was surviving, would soon walk into a building with my name on the deed, believing they were too important for me to attend the event. And I had no idea that one day, standing under the warm lights of that restaurant, I would see exactly how much power silence gives when you stop letting it cage you.
I was still invisible to them then.
But not for much longer. If Chapter 1 was about the house that made me invisible, then Chapter 2 is about the city that taught me how to be seen. Chicago did not hand me anything, but it never lied to me the way my family did. Chicago said, "Work and maybe you'll survive. Work harder and maybe you'll rise." It was harsh, cold, loud, unforgiving, and somehow exactly what I needed. 2 years after I moved there, something shifted. It wasn't fate or luck or any of the things people like to pretend guide their lives. It was simply the outcome of refusing to quit. At the cafe where I worked, the owner called me into her office one day. She was a middle-aged woman who always wore bright scarves and smelled like roasted beans. She told me one of the shift managers had moved away and asked if I wanted the assistant manager position. The raise wasn't huge, but $38,000 a year felt like a fortune compared to where I had started. I took the offer because I never said no to a chance, not even small ones. With that promotion came something else: structure. My schedule became predictable enough that I could sign up for night classes at a community college. Business basics, accounting, marketing. I paid for each course with my own money. Some months, I could take 2 classes, others none. I remember standing in the registration line once, checking my balance twice because I needed to make sure I still had enough left for rent. But I didn't stop. And that was when the next door opened, quietly and unexpectedly. The office building I cleaned at night belonged to a small restaurant group. The owner, Hannah Reed, was a woman from Boston with sharp eyes, a brisk walk, and a kindness she hid behind a tough voice. One night, she walked past me as I was wiping down a floor-to-ceiling window. She stopped, watched me for a moment, and then asked, "Why is someone as sharp as you still cleaning floors at midnight?" I didn't know what to say. I just shrugged and told her the truth, that I didn't have help. I worked 2 jobs. That college was slow because money was slow. That life wasn't easy. She gave a small laugh and said something I didn't understand at the time. "You don't need help. You have hunger. That saves more people than money ever will." From that night on, she treated me differently. She brought me leftover meals from her restaurants, so I wouldn't have to eat toast after long shifts. She asked about my classes. And eventually, she started teaching me. Not in a classroom way. In a practical, real way. She pointed at things while her managers ran meetings. "See that order sheet? That's how you keep a kitchen from drowning. Listen to how he talks to the supplier. Respect first, pressure second. Watch how she handles a staff dispute. That's leadership without yelling." Every weekend, I shadowed one of her managers. I kept a small spiral notebook in my apron and filled it with words I didn't know, then looked them up on the bus ride home. Lease agreements, gross margin, depreciation, labor ratios. I was building a dictionary of a world I wanted to belong to. When I turned 26, Hannah surprised me. She invited me to lunch at one of her restaurants, a quiet place with brick walls, warm lighting, and the smell of fresh bread drifting from the kitchen. I thought she needed extra help with a busy weekend. Instead, she said, "I'm selling this place." My fork froze midair. She explained that she wanted to start a project in Europe and needed to free her time. The restaurant was doing well, but required someone young, hungry, and patient. "You should buy it," she said. I laughed. Actually laughed. The price was $850,000. That number sounded bigger than my entire future. But she wasn't joking. She told me the bank could fund half. She would personally finance the other half as a private loan. And I would need to put in $50,000 of my own savings. Every cent I owned. The number scared me, but the chance scared me more. A door that big doesn't open twice. I signed. My hands shook so hard that I messed up my first signature and had to redo it. It felt like stepping onto a bridge I had no proof could hold my weight. The first year nearly broke me. I worked 16-hour days. I learned how to fix a broken ice machine at 2 in the morning. I learned that some customers wanted to be heard more than they wanted to be fed. I learned how to fire someone kindly, without humiliation. I learned that money disappears quickly if you don't watch it every day. But I also learned that small touches, warm lights, the smell of bread, soft music, could turn strangers into regulars. By year 3, we won a small award from a local food magazine. Nothing huge, but enough that people started saying my restaurant's name like it mattered. One afternoon, a businessman from New York walked in, ate lunch, and asked to meet the owner. He offered to invest. That is how I opened my second location in Boston, then a third in Denver. By 29, Hannah's loan was paid off early. By 30, I owned a restaurant group worth several $1,000,000 on paper and paid myself a comfortable salary of $120,000 a year. I bought a townhouse in Denver with 3 floors, tall windows, and a view of the skyline that still makes my heart squeeze with gratitude. I decorated it slowly, piece by piece, with furniture I chose for myself and not for anyone else's opinion. And still, not once, did my family ask what I was doing with my life. They just assumed I was somewhere in Chicago pouring coffee for strangers. The silence used to hurt. By then, it simply felt like protection. But nothing prepared me for the day my event manager emailed me the wedding booking form with the couple's names printed at the top. Daniel Miller and Emily Jones. My brother had chosen my restaurant. My staff was planning his wedding. And still, he did not invite me. I sat there staring at the screen, letting the truth settle in my chest. I wasn't on his guest list. But he was standing on my floor. And for the first time in my life, the balance had shifted. The wedding morning arrived with that strange Denver mix of bright sun and sharp cold. The sky was a deep, polished blue, and the air had a bite that slipped through my coat when I stepped out of my townhouse. I drove to the restaurant early, long before any guests arrived. Even though it was my building, I felt an old, familiar tension in my chest, the kind I used to feel walking through the halls of my childhood home. But this time, I reminded myself, the ground beneath my feet was mine. Every tile, every light, every breath of warm air in that place came from years of my work. No one could push me out unless I allowed it. Upstairs, in the glass-walled office that overlooked the main dining hall, I watched my staff prepare the venue. It was almost peaceful. Round tables, covered with crisp white cloths, stood in perfect rows. Tall floral arrangements, white roses, eucalyptus, soft greenery, rose from the center of each one. Candles waited to be lit, and soft music filled the room like a gentle hum. My team moved with quiet professionalism, a rhythm they had learned through long nights and busy weekends. From above, the whole scene looked like a painting I had created. Guests began to trickle in around noon. Dresses in soft colors, suits in dark shades, shiny shoes tapping on polished floors. They laughed, posed for photos near the ivy wall that had become a popular backdrop, and admired the room without knowing the history behind the woman who designed it all. Then I saw them, my parents. My mother wore a navy dress that shimmered every time she moved. My father looked tired, older than I remembered, but he still carried that confident walk he always saved for events tied to Daniel. Their eyes scanned the room, warm with pride, excited for the day ahead. They didn't look for me. They hadn't looked for me in years. A few minutes later, Daniel walked in. My brother looked exactly like the man my parents always believed he would become. Tall, polished, confident. His suit was fitted perfectly, his hair trimmed neatly. He held his fiancée's hand, the calm, beautiful woman named Emily, holding a bouquet of pale roses. They smiled at the guests. They posed for photos. They greeted my parents with hugs. And not once did any of them ask where I was. Maybe that was the moment something inside me finally hardened. Maybe that was the moment I stopped trying to be the quiet shadow they ignored. I stepped away from the window. I walked downstairs. I wore a simple black dress and a dark green coat. My hair was pulled back, my makeup light almost barely there. I wasn't dressed like the owner of $1 million restaurant group. I was dressed like someone who belonged in their own skin, someone who no longer needed to impress anyone. When I stepped into the entrance hall, my mother saw me first. Her face froze. A flicker of annoyance. A flicker of fear. A flicker of something she couldn't hide in time. "What are you doing here?" she whispered sharply. I met her eyes with a calm I didn't feel. "I came to wish my brother well." Inside, my heart was beating in hard, painful bursts, but I kept my voice steady. Daniel turned when he heard her tone. His expression tightened the second he saw me. "You weren't invited," he said. "You need to leave." A few guests nearby fell silent. Heads turned. The music kept playing, but something about the air felt heavier. I took one step forward. "I own this place," I said softly. "Why would I leave my own building?" Silence. Then he laughed, loud, sharp, performative. "You work here, right?" he said. "As what? A manager? A server? I don't care." "Security." He snapped his fingers. The two security guards near the side door turned and walked toward us. They wore dark suits, earpieces, and carried themselves with the quiet authority of men who knew their job well.
Daniel pointed at me.
"Get her out. She does not belong here." The guards reached me.
But they didn't touch me.
They didn't look at him.
They looked at me.
And the taller one bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Miller," he said in a low, respectful voice, "what would you like us to do?" That was the crack that split the room open. My mother's hand dropped from her necklace. My father's face drained of color. Daniel's smirk fell apart, replaced by confusion. Guests stopped talking. Some stepped back. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" I straightened my spine and let my voice fill the room in a way it never had when I lived in that small house in Columbus. "This wedding will not happen," I said. "Please clear the hall." The guards turned immediately. "Yes, ma'am." They walked through the room, speaking to guests, guiding staff, giving calm, firm instructions. The music shifted off. The lights brightened. My event manager caught my eye and nodded before telling servers to stop serving drinks and begin escorting guests outside. "What are you doing?" Daniel yelled. His face was red, his voice rising. "You can't do this. It's my wedding." "This is my restaurant," I said quietly. "Your name is on an event contract. My name is on the deed." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded copy of the property agreement. My name, Lauren Miller, was printed clearly at the bottom, under owner. I held it where they could see. Guests gasped. Someone dropped a champagne flute. "You're lying," my mother whispered. "You never asked," I replied. "You only ever asked what Daniel needed." The room was nearly empty now. Chairs stood abandoned, plates untouched. The hall echoed with the shuffling of guests being guided outside. I looked at the brother who had been handed every chance I earned alone. "You told them to throw me out," I said softly. "So now I'm asking you to leave." His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. I turned to the guards. "Escort Mr. Miller and my parents out," I said. "Their account with us is closed. Permanently." The guards obeyed. And for the first time in my life, my family walked away because I told them to, not because they wanted to. The patio outside the restaurant felt colder than the Denver air. Guests stood in clusters, clutching jackets, purses, and half-spoken questions. Some stared at me with shock, their minds trying to rewrite the story they thought they knew. Others looked away politely, afraid to meet the eyes of the woman who had just ended a wedding. And then there were a few, very few, who looked at me with something that felt close to respect. But I did not explain myself. I had spent my whole childhood explaining why I deserved space. I would never do it again. I stood by the glass doors, steady in my heels, my hands clasped in front of me. My heart was still beating too fast, but inside, something quiet had settled. It felt like standing on a cliff at dawn, breathless but sure of the ground beneath you. Then I saw Emily walking toward me. Her wedding dress brushed softly against the brick floor, gathering dust at the hem. She held her bouquet, like she wasn't sure whether to hold on or let go. Her face was pale, her eyes shiny, but her steps were steady. She stopped just a few feet away and looked at me with confusion, hurt, and something fragile beneath it. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "You own this place?" "Yes," I said gently. "And several others." She blinked at me, trying to connect the dots in a story she didn't know she was part of. "I also own the company that catered your bridal shower," I added. "And the restaurant where you had your engagement dinner. You liked my food both times." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they looked years older. "He never told me he had a sister," she whispered. "He said his parents only had one child." There was no pain this time. No sharp sting in my chest. It felt like touching an old scar, familiar, but no longer bleeding. "That was his choice," I said. "And this is mine." Emily looked down at her bouquet, then back at me. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Not for today, though this is going to be a mess, but for everything before today. For what I didn't know." I nodded. "You know now." Something inside her seemed to give way. She slid the engagement ring off her finger. The diamond caught the afternoon light as she placed it in my hand, not gently, but firmly, as if she wanted to free herself before she lost her courage. "I don't think I want to marry a man who can erase his own sister," she said. "You can keep this, sell it, break it, whatever you want. I'm going home." And then she walked away alone, her white dress moving like a ghost across the patio. Near the gate stood my parents. My mother's face was stiff, her anger searching for somewhere to land now that her voice no longer controlled the room. My father looked gray, hands shaking slightly at his sides. And Daniel, my brother, was arguing with one of the guards, pointing wildly at me, the building, the sky, anything that might save him from the reality unfolding around him. No one stepped in to fix it. No one offered him comfort. No one softened the truth for him. For the first time in his life, Daniel was standing in the storm he created. I left them there, frozen and furious, and walked back into the restaurant. The silence inside felt thick, almost sacred. The candles were unlit. The tables stood empty. The whole place looked like a wedding that had simply chosen not to exist. I stood in the middle of the hall, breathing in the quiet. For years, I had imagined myself in a beautiful space like this, an owner, a creator, someone who finally mattered. I never imagined the moment would come wrapped in this kind of chaos. But even then, standing under the warm lights, I felt something close to peace. I walked upstairs to my office. The glass walls still had faint fingerprints from where I'd pressed my hands earlier. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The event contract sat on the screen. My fingers hovered over the keys only a moment before I canceled every charge except the non-refundable deposit. I didn't need their money. I needed the clean break. Next, I opened a blank email. Subject: Final notice. The words came easily, maybe because I had been writing them in my mind for years. I am ending all contact. No more calls. No more messages. No more pretending we are family, when the truth is we stopped being one long ago. I do not hate you. I do not wish you harm. I simply choose peace. I wish you health. I wish you safety. But I will not carry you anymore. I sign my name and press send. The click echoed louder than any argument we had ever had. That night, I returned to my townhouse. The walls were light gray, the floors warm wood, the air calm and still. I set my coat on the hook, poured myself a glass of water, not wine, and sat on the floor in front of the wide window. Denver's lights glowed softly in the distance. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one standing at the sink in the Columbus house while her brother was praised as the family's future. The girl who watched envelopes of money slide to him while she worked double shifts. The girl who learned to shrink so he could shine. I wished I could tell her something. You were never the extra piece. You were the foundation. Revenge is not always loud. Sometimes it is choosing peace over pain. Sometimes it is closing a door that should have been closed years before. Sometimes it is simply stepping into a life you built without permission from anyone. A week later, my lawyer called. We've had several inquiries, she said. Venues in Europe want to partner with your group. They heard about what happened at the Denver location. They like your leadership. I smiled as I looked out at the evening sky. Tell them I'm interested. That was the truth of my life now. While my family tried to make their world small enough for only one golden child, mine was stretching across cities, across America, maybe soon across Europe. They had thrown me out of their plans. I had thrown them out of my future. And for the first time, my future felt wide open.